This is Group 7's SRA 111 final video, made by Wes Casey, Sean Chikello, Ali Klein, Jessica Dietrich, and Michael Dubois. Cyberwarfare is a war of state-on-state actions that takes place in the cyberspace rather than on the ground, which could lead to military retaliation. The emergence of cyber attacks and warfare have created a virtual battlefield that governments have had to quickly adapt to in order to protect their countries. Cyberwarfare has opened new doorways of attack for enemies, such as holding computer systems hostage with ransomware, shutting down systems with denial of service attacks, and even shutting down full power grids, as seen in Ukraine twice. New weapons and technologies in cyber warfare are more advanced than ever before and are rapidly evolving. These advances have created new threats that countries have had to adapt to and understand in order to best counter them. How have these cyber warfare advances changed modern warfare?
Throughout human history, warfare has evolved at the same rate human technology has. Basic tools first invented for farming were turned into spears and swords. The wheel, which allowed mass travel, building, and farming, were later used as weapons in chariots and wagons. Gunpowder, originally created by the Chinese as a medicine to promote eternal life, is still used today as the main propellant for most weapons. Following in the line of technological advances, the computer is no different. Computers were first invented to solve math equations and to overall make human activity easier, but are now being used to cause arguably more destruction than any other weapon the world has seen. The Cold War slowly evolved into the Code War, and WMDs no longer mean weapons of mass destruction, but weapons of mass disruption. While this new form of warfare might not necessarily pull a trigger or drop a bomb, it can inflict terror and destruction in more complex and traumatic ways than before. As weapons became more powerful and more devastating, wars between the global superpowers such as the US and Russia evolved from face-to-face fighting to the use of proxy wars. The large superpowers would find smaller conflicts such as civil wars in other countries and send resources, troops, etc. to help fight for whichever side shared their common beliefs and ideals. The growing use of the computers and similar technology has gone hand in hand with the use of proxy wars. These new cyber weapons allow countries, organizations, or even individuals to cause mass damage, terror, or worse. Everything from disarming security systems, spying on critical information, and damaging nuclear power plants are all available with the use of these cyber weapons. On top of all of this, as well as cyber warfare being relatively new, the perpetrator or attacker can almost entirely remain anonymous. Skilled attackers can enter, cause whatever damage they please, and leave without ever being noticed.
These advances in technology have led to a drastic change in the battlefield, differing greatly from the time of Sun Tzu. However, many of his principles can be applied to the use of cyber warfare. The most important of these principles is objective. Whether it is a physical attack or a digital attack, it must be done with a single, specific goal in mind. This could be interrupting enemy communications, infecting target systems, or stealing data. Also important is the economy of force. Each operation must be examined to determine the appropriate amount of resources are being used. Rather than using all resources to attack a heavily protected target, it should be considered that smaller groups would be better off exploiting less protected weak spots in a system. Last is the concept of security. Any military operation must appropriately manage risk to ensure a successful attack. Though these methodologies are universal in their application, the use of cyberspace as a battlefield has created several of its own principles. Most notably is its relative lack of physical limitations. Cyber war must create a real-world consequence, even if the medium in which it is conducted is intangible. This seemingly infinite environment means that physical distance and obstacles will not interfere with operations. Combatants could be in different countries, thousands of miles away, while waging war against each other.
The ability to attack from thousands of miles away with cyber warfare means there is a huge difference between weapons used in cyber warfare and those used in traditional warfare. Part of this difference lies in the development of these weapons. The development of cyber weapons, attacks, and counterattacks happens very quickly. They are cheap to make and easy to hide, while traditional weapons are quite the opposite. Although cyber weapons and attacks are quick and inexpensive, they are extremely complex. It takes teams of very smart people to create cyber attacks that work. One of the complexities with offensive cyber warfare is the fact that once an attack is used, it will often no longer be effective as long as the target system is updated to fix the exploited vulnerability. It's very difficult for an attacker to know whether or not a cyber weapon has become ineffective, which is why creating and successfully executing a cyber attack is so complicated. Due to the nature of cyberspace, the tools used to conduct a cyber attack differ significantly from that of physical warfare. Most traditional weapons are designed with one purpose, but cybersecurity professionals can use this knowledge of cyber warfare to improve their own security.
At the same time, the threat of devastating cyber attacks is growing as offensive weapons develop just as quickly as defensive ones. The use of cyber warfare is on the rise, with at least 78 significant cyber incidents that have resulted in successful attacks on government agencies, national defenses, and high-tech companies, or economic crimes with losses of more than $1 million. One such example is Stuxnet. This weapon was a string of code that made its way onto a top-secret nuclear power plant in Iran via flash drive from one of the employees without the employee ever knowing. The code was designed to rapidly spin and then rapidly stop the fuselages inside the power plant, causing them to become damaged and needing to be replaced or fixed. Ultimately, this halted the entire process of enriching the uranium, which was believed to be used to create dangerous weapons. The plant eventually closed down without cause, but some believe that it was due to Stuxnet. All of this was done with a few lines of code, and the perpetrator still to this day has remained anonymous. If this type of damage is possible, what is stopping someone else from doing even more harm, such as causing a meltdown at different nuclear power plants or dismantling the power grid of entire countries?
Weapons that have these devastating effects are currently available or will be so in the near future. One such weapon is an EMP. Before cyber warfare, all the weapons used were external, such as guns, bombs, etc. The advancement into cyber warfare made it possible for attacks to happen within a system. With EMPs, damage is done to a circuit when it generates an extra electrical current. It does so by overloading the circuit's components with an extremely high voltage. The harm done can range from a small malfunction to a complete short of the electrical circuit. This cyber warfare weapon is unknown to many American citizens. However, it creates a great threat to our government, national security, military, and others alike. Should a large-scale attack occur, our ability to communicate and transport goods could potentially be at a loss, as well as electrical power. For such a threatening weapon, it is a good thing that there is a defense against it. The following 8-step plan was created by security experts. First, it is important to create a larger distance between yourself and the attacker. Secondly, reinforce the physical building with walls, metal lining, etc. Third, eliminate windows if possible, shielding them if not. Next, replace any copper wires needed for communication with fiber optic ones. Then install an electromagnetic detector alarm. Once you've done this, create a safe room that is lined with metal or sensitive electronics. Then add metal shielding or jacketing in the internal cabling. And finally, protect all conduits leading into the building by using electromagnetic fibers. This step-by-step plan proves that following the advancement of cyber warfare came the protection against it.
Although elements of cyber warfare have followed some classic principles of war, the emergence of cyber weapons and cyber warfare on the world stage has created a new field of battle. New weapons like EMPs pose global threats that could affect whole countries. Cyber warfare has made war even more complex, as offensive and defensive weapons are rapidly being produced. Governments need to create countermeasures to cyber attacks in advance to combat them. As cyber warfare grows and advances, governments and the world need to be ready.